archiving in the Metro Library. So you'll see a little button there, and we'll ask that you consent. Of course, you have the option of leaving the meeting. You can turn your camera off, change your name, what have you, to protect your privacy, but we did want to give you a heads up to that. We also wanted to ask you to please keep yourself muted throughout the presentation and as community members who are sharing their story speak. And then we'll have some time at the end for questions and answers. You can use the chat, but then at the end, again, you can unmute yourself if you're part of the broader audience. And then one other housekeeping item is we are going to recommend that you use Zoom in speaker view. So if you go to your upper right-hand corner, you may see a button that says view. You can view this in gallery. Speaker view is an option, and that's the best approach to experiencing this conversation. So without further ado, I'm going to give a little bit of a background on LA Metro, Metro Arts and Design, and then I'm going to hand it off to Mark, who will share about his artwork, his project, and then we'll get a little bit of historical context from Alan Weeks for the red car, and then we'll open it up to community members who generously shared their stories with Mark, Stephen Greenfield. As some of you may know, LA Metro is not only the operator of the county's transit system, but we plan, coordinate, design, construct, and maintain this massive system that covers 1,400 square miles. We are the third busiest transit system in the United States, with the largest infrastructure program in the country. We are growing at the fastest pace we ever have, with new bus rapid transit, updated bus routes, and new rail. Metro Arts and Design is part of that program from the start to the end through operation and maintenance. We believe that integrating art and artists into all of our public-facing facilities enlivens the public realm and improves the rider experience, as well as enriches Los Angeles County broadly with cultural landmarks. We put people first in our work. We connect to creative communities throughout Los Angeles County. And we champion innovation in the ways that we integrate art and artists into our system, whether that's performance, whether that's temporary work, whether that's infrastructure, like you see here along the Gold Line, or what's now known as the L Line. And just zooming in a little bit closer to that probably illegible map that I shared earlier, because there's just so much going on, we have the Regional Connector Transit Project, which is critical. It's a critical link bridge that's being created now between Union Station and 7th and Metro Center, so that you, those of you who remember riding rail or are riding rail now, can save 20 minutes, up to 20 minutes on your trip to wherever you're going, whether it's downtown Santa Monica, whether it's East LA, whether it's Long Beach, whether it's Azusa. So essentially, you're gonna have a one-seat ride from Azusa on the what will be known as the A line, or the blue, all the way down to Long Beach. One seat, no transfers. And then the same thing, one seat, no transfers from downtown Santa Monica to East LA. So this is going to be groundbreaking. We're building 3 new stations in downtown to make it happen. One at the Little Tokyo Arts District station. We're building a new station there. It's going to be a transit hub. Historic Broadway at 2nd and Broadway, and then Grand Ave Arts Bunker Hill at 2nd and Hope. These projects are slated for completion in 2022. And the work is happening. And that brings us to Mark. He is one of 7 commissioned artists for this project, and his work will be installed at the Historic Broadway Station at the concourse level. And as many of you know, he was inspired by his memory of the former red car, and used this project as a way to pay homage, as well as open up the possibility of sharing memories, which is what we have today. And just to give you a sense of where this piece will be, when you go down from the station, the top of the station entry, to this intermediary level before you head down to the platform, there will be the biggest glass mosaic work in our system. That's by Mark. And it'll be in this location at 147 feet wide by 10 feet high. And without further ado, I want to invite Mark to unmute himself. I'm not going to read his bio. We can pop that in the chat. But I will say that he is a longtime LA leader, artist, and cultural worker. And I'm just so honored to invite him to really take over the program that he put together.
Thank you so much, Leticia. I really appreciate that. And thank you all for joining us for what I consider to be this celebration of the red car. It disappeared about 60 years ago, this year actually, and I thought it was high time that we kind of remember it. In early 2016, I was invited by the Los Angeles Metropolitan Transit Authority to submit a proposal for an art piece for one of the 3 regional connector stations. Leticia, could you show us the first slide, please? So this is actually the original proposal that I put in. It was initially for the Little Tokyo station, but the panel thought it would probably be more appropriate to put it at the Historic Broadway Station. So I didn't argue with them. I thought it was a great idea. History has always been one of my favorite subjects in school and still informs a great deal of art that I do to this day. In giving thought to what I might do for the Metro project, it occurred to me that that my very first romantic notions of public transportation were driven by a visit to Disneyland in the 1950s. Could you show the next slide, please? And the next. I associated the red car with the trolley that ran down Disneyland's Main Street. We left LA for a few years and returned in the early 60s, just in time to witness the red car's disappearance. Red Car Requiem is my attempt at memorializing its passing, and your contributions, as well as the others who participated in the questionnaire, will go a long way towards preserving the legacy of this most cherished part of Los Angeles history. Next slide, please. So this is actually the original artwork that I did. I had a residency in North Carolina at a place called the McColl Center for Art Plus Innovation. And they gave me a studio that was big enough for me to actually accomplish this. Next. I accomplished it in 2 pieces. Originally, the work was 2.5 feet by 37 feet, literally a quarter scale. It was done using acrylic inks for the most part on something called Duralar, which is synthetic drafting film. Next. So there you see both the sections of it. Next. And so what I did was a series of rosettes, the idea being that you would travel from one destination to another destination to another destination. Each destination has similarities, but at the same time, each is very individual. And those dark marks that you see in the middle of them are actually the punches that the conductors used to punch your ticket with. You could take a look at somebody's ticket back in that day and pretty much tell where they had traveled. Next. The artwork was completed in 2018. I added some more elements to it, rethought some parts of it. And so I think this is a pretty good representation of what the final pieces started to look like. In consultation with Metro, we actually decided on a fabricator in Cuernavaca, Mexico, called Perdomo. Next. So fabrication took place in 2019. Perdomo is one of the world-class fabricators in mosaic tile, and I was really honored to work with them. I had the opportunity to go down and actually see the colors and basically check on, make sure that everything was the way it was supposed to be, and they were right on it in all respects. Next. Next. So as you can see, in just the same way as I had to do the original artwork in sections, so too that they had to do it in sections. Their tables were only 8 feet wide, and so sections that you see here are 8 feet. They had to add another 2 feet on a little later on. Next. The idea was that this is abstraction, and the lines in between, we're trying to simulate the idea of blurring that you would see as one of the red cars would pass by. The colors were primarily those colors that are dominant in the red car. Next. And this gives you a detailed look at what the mosaic tiles were all about. I was really impressed with the fact that they were able to get some of the nuances and subtle shading that that happens with acrylic ink. Acrylic ink handles a lot like watercolor. And so there's these gradations and variations that are very, very subtle. And Perdomo just nailed it in so many respects. Next. Next. Yeah, at this point, the piece is actually finished. We're just awaiting shipment, and installation is due to take place sometime in 2022. Really kind of excited about that. Could we show the video of the completed piece?
Sure, I'm just gonna reshare my screen. And there's no audio here.
So from what I understand, this is the largest piece that Metro has ever commissioned. So I'm really quite jazzed over that fact. So the questionnaire that I sent out to, I think Cal State LA sent it out to close to 500 people. They've got over 100 responses on it. And some of the stories that we were able to take from it were just absolutely priceless. All of that stuff is eventually going to wind up in the Metro archives, which I'm glad of. And hopefully in the future, it will be available to people who want to research and really get a feeling of what the red car was all about. I'd really like to take this opportunity to publicly thank the Alumni Association at Cal State Los Angeles. Cal State has been just absolutely incredible to work with over the years. And at this point, I'm even broadening our relationship. So I'm going to be doing a lot more things with Cal State. I was an alum. I graduated in 1987 with a master's degree, and it's just been an upward trajectory ever since. I'd also like to take this opportunity to give my thanks to Leticia Ivins for all the help that she's put in making this happen, and also Sasha Ali. Without them, none of this would have been possible. So at this point, I'd like to introduce somebody who used to work with Metro a long time ago, and he's an acclaimed photographer and a historian, Mr. Alan Weeks. Alan? Alan, can you unmute?
Forgot about that. I'm sorry. Good morning. I thank the MTA for inviting me to this meeting. And I think it's quite appropriate that we are celebrating the demise or the remembrance of the red car system, not the demise. My name is Alan Weeks, and I was born in Los Angeles in 1932. I worked for the RTD MTA schedule department and retired from there. We're here to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the last red car, and I just can't believe 50 years has gone by because I was on the, Harvey and I were both on the last red car. When we say red car, we mean Pacific Electric Railway, the largest interurban electric railway in the world. And it was covered over 1,100 square miles of Southern California, ran from Santa Monica to in the east, Redlands in San Bernardino County, and from Mount Lowe to Long Beach. In 1946, the Pacific Electric carried 178 million people, which was their best year. That was 1946. They also carried quite a little bit of freight. I think that was about a third or about a fourth of their income was freight. Sadly, they only made a profit 3 times after the founding until there was a large gap of no profit. And then in the war, during the World War II, they made a profit for those 4 years, carried heavy loads during World War II. Henry Huntington started the Pacific Electric Railway in the 1890s. He was a nephew of Collis P. Huntington, who was an official with the Southern Pacific Railroad in San Francisco. He came south and decided to start his own railway. He was working with the Southern Pacific at that time. He built his first line from Los Angeles to Long Beach in 1901. And then he purchased the already built Los Angeles and Pasadena Railway, which was built in the 1890s. And that combined those 2 lines. And then he continued to expand through and continued to expand until he sold his, and I don't really know what the reason was. I don't know the background, but the Southern Pacific maybe made a great offer, but he sold Pacific Electric Railway in 1911 and then turned his interest to the Los Angeles Railway, which he owned until the time of his death, and his family owned until 1945 when it was sold to National City Lines and became the Los Angeles Transit Lines. So he was a real railroad family. He had his own private car in San Marino, parked underneath his house. The owners of the Pacific Electric Railway realized sometime, I think in the 1920s, that the economics were just not there to continue operating rail passenger service. They just would have had to invest. It was based on pure economics, and they would have had to spend millions on infrastructure, or the electrical overhead system and the rail system and the right-of-way, ballast and so on. The physical plant would need to be completely rebuilt, and they would have need to buy new cars, which they did buy some cars at that time. So beginning in the late 1920s, they started, they had made that decision to convert to buses and rail line from rails to buses. So the ridership was declining, and they were running at a loss until World War II. And people, after the war, people started buying automobiles and moving out of the area and into the distant areas, and they abandoned, and they gave up on the PE. There were multiple abandonments after the war. Then they started abandoning again. There were abandonments in 1949, 50, and 51. And in 1953, the Southern Pacific Railroad sold all the passenger service and leased the rail lines to Jesse Hall, who owned the San Diego Transit System. And he turned that into the Metropolitan Coach Lines to operate the old PE lines under his system. But he did continue to abandon one rail at a time. Contrary to the Disney movie, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and the myth, there was no great transit conspiracy that killed the red cars. When the first MTA was founded in 1958, they combined the LA transit lines with the Pacific Electric Railway, the yellow cars with the red cars, into the state corporation, the MTA, it was Los Angeles Metropolitan Transit Authority. They made a feeble attempt in 1958 to try to save the Long Beach rail line. And they wanted to modernize it and buy new cars and build it, make it faster. Well, there was union opposition for whatever reason. The railroad unions opposed that, so that idea fell through. So I don't know how serious it was, but it sounded like it was a serious attempt. It had the political leaders in Southern California realized in the 40s and 50s that they had a gold mine in the infrastructure here, the right-of-ways and the plant and the red cars. Even if they were wearing out and getting older, they still had a good system that could have saved. I think some of the red car lines would have been saved had they done it 20 years prior. We don't know. Did special interests have something to do with the long delay in the state taking over? I don't know. We'll never know. At great cost, the MTA is and has rebuilt so many lines that are now more modern, faster, and better, and serve better and better service, more frequency than the PE did. But the PE was more nostalgic. But anyway, after almost 30 years of no rail service between the abandonment in 1961 and when they started up the Long Beach line, which is interesting. The Long Beach line was one of the last to be abandoned, and it was one of the first to be resurrected, thanks to Kenneth Hahn, who pushed the LA County Transit Authority to rebuild that line, and it's running. So I never dreamed that the system would come back, but it did. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan. And
you're welcome. My pleasure.
Wonderful context to lead us to Mark. Would you like to introduce the first speaker?
Yeah, I saw that Ralph Armitage was here. Is he still here? Ralph? Maybe not.
I am here.
Oh, you are here. Oh, great. Could you tell us a little bit about your experiences with the red car back in the day?
Yeah. We moved to Southern California from Rhode Island in 1948. Lived in the city of Azusa, bought a home there, and started school. I knew about the red car because my home was on Bela Street near Slauson Elementary School. We would go up a block to 5th Street, go across and pick one of the side streets, went up to 9th and got on the red car. And the first time I got on that red car, I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I remember my mom and I got on and we rode down to Los Angeles. I think it was around Spring Street. We went to the Broadway department store. I'd never seen a store that large in my life, so it was very impressive. What impressed me most was riding on that red car and seeing the communities as we passed by and we see other cars going by. I'm reminded by that, the flash of red in your mural, it captures that sense of movement and adventure. And I love that about the tiles. Would go into Los Angeles usually every other month or so. Well, I hadn't realized it until just saw the picture there of people in 1950 leaving the Rose Parade, which I used to go to just about every year, and they could take the red car. And I now realize I didn't have to drive down there. I could have taken the darn thing back to Azusa. So it's quite an experience. I did commute on a motorcycle from Azusa to Cal State Los Angeles, where I got my bachelor's degree. And then that was in history. So I've had a lifelong love of history. And even though I've worked in a more technical field, history gives you a foundation to look back and to look forward. And I think we lose a lot of that today by people not getting that sense of adventure. And riding on a red rail car just gives strength to that feeling of the love that you have for a community. And now when I look at the books by Michael Connolly about Bosch, and I see the destinations and the transportation and such, it takes me back, even though I lived all over the world and am now living in Colorado. I love those books because he captures the essence of Los Angeles. And part of that was the Angel's flight and other transportation in Los Angeles. So I wholeheartedly support what you're doing. Alan, and I do think that, or Mark, excuse me, I do think that it's going to be a bang up thing. I can't wait to go back to Los Angeles, visit my daughter who lives in San Diego, and take her up and show her the rail car and the significance of that. My kids get tired of me talking about history, but I think they really do have an appreciation for it. So I very much appreciate what you're doing here. And I still love Los Angeles with all its smog and its traffic and everything else. And Mr. Weeks, Alan Weeks, I do appreciate your presentation as a fellow historian. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ralph. We really appreciate that. I'm not sure if Linda Ravenswood is here. I'm gonna call names, and if you're not here, we understand. But there's so many people on this that I can't really distinguish at this point whether you're here or not. Leticia, if you would, could you bring up the slides of Tom Bliss, or from Tom Bliss? Leticia, you there?
Yeah, bear with me 1 second.
Okay.
All right,
Yeah,
they're
Tom
coming
Bliss
right
is,
up.
he responded, but he couldn't be here today. I just got a text from him, actually. He's traipsing somewhere in the Northwest and sends his regards to everybody. But his was one of the funniest stories that I came across out of all the questionnaires that I reviewed. Apparently, in the early 70s, his family bought one of the red cars, and they situated it in their backyard in Van Nuys. And he would have, they said they would have parties there, and also Thanksgiving dinners from time to time. They said they could put the whole family in one of these red cars with a big long table and accommodate everybody for Thanksgiving. I asked him what happened to it, and he said that, you know, it was literally falling apart. I think it was termite eaten and all kinds of other things, and they finally had to get rid of it. But he said for most of his teenage years, it was something that they really enjoyed. I think there's another slide of Tom there. Yeah, that's Tom sitting astride the top of one of the red. I really appreciated his story. So now I think we're going to go to Melinda Maxwell Smith. Melinda?
Unmute.
Could you
Am I-
unmute, Melinda?
Am
Oh,
I
thank you.
unmuted? Great,
Yeah,
thank you.
you're unmuted now. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm delighted. The red car brings so many memories of going from Echo Park, where I grew up, moved to there when I was less than a year old and lived on a hill. And so the long walk down to Sunset was pretty arduous, but my mom and I went every Saturday morning and took the red line downtown, took where it led us off. We took the Angel's flight down to Grand Central Market and came back. But it was part of my growing up. And Mark knows this. I have written something of the history of a family in Echo Park. It was a wonderful place to grow up because the topography kind of mirrored the economy, and people who lived on the top of the hill and the people who lived on the bottom of the hill, and in between, you could be whoever you are, black, white, red, brown, straight, curly, whatever. You could be accepted. It was a very democratic stronghold. And this is a poem about a woman who I hope is doing well now. Her name was Karen Pogue. I wonder what became of Karen Pogue and how she really lost her toe. While that mishap is history, still shrouded in mystery, what was clear to all who could hear was how her mother yelled and screamed. We could hear her shriek even when we dreamed. An image frozen in my mind from 1956, right to the present time. May her life have turned from terror-filled to joyously sublime. Is Karen at 10, 2 years older than I, run walking away from her sickly yellow house through the weedy patch in want of tending, while the screams from the house were never ending. The look on her defiant young face said, I'm free, you can't catch me. All the while her mother, drunk, I wonder now, was hollering out the window, come back, you good-for-nothing stupid girl, or I'll cut off your other toe. Come back and finish up the washing. Karen didn't, but ran, risking another squashing. We thought we had the Cinderella story being acted out right there off the alley, right down the hill from Denise and Sally, where Karen, doing all the chores, laundry sprouted like mushroom spores, while the wicked stepmother, malcontent, treated Karen with devilish and selfish intent. I wonder now how it was to be Karen Pogue and to want for fathering, to want for mothering, sister and brothering. Want was one of her middle names. At Elysian Heights Elementary, I never saw her enter games. What can have happened to Karen's mom to make her think that that was an okay way to treat her daughter? Was it drink? None of us kids was ever quite sure how Karen's great toe parted company with her foot. The story went something like this. Karen's mom took the sweet 3-year-old little miss down to Sunset Boulevard in Echo Park, the main drag. Karen was not yet quite so broken that she ended up at the hands of the old hag. Curious at 3, she ran from her mama's vice-like grip to see what she wanted to see. She didn't trip, just a step or two, but she lost her shoe, scaring that mama into a rage so great, inside of it she couldn't see straight. So Mrs. Pogue pushed. The crowd on the street hushed. Young Karen was on the track. Her mama stood in back. The streetcar couldn't swerve, so promptly cut off Karen's big toe. It just never looked right after that, except as a testament to her woe. A lonely set of 4 at the end of a lonely foot, bearing weight and bearing witness to this lonely only child, trapped by hate in a rough patch, in need of tending, and sorely in need of mending. I only know, whenever I crossed that bit of Sunset Boulevard, I never stepped on the tracks. Forgetting Karen was too hard. Even after they removed the red car line and all the steel tracks, so shiny and fine, it made my teeth chatter, caused my hands to make fists when crossing from north to south, across Sunset bound west. It made my own toes curl to think of Karen's great one sheared off so. I wonder what happened to Karen's big toe. Facebook yields lots of Karen Pogues. How am I to know if she survived her childhood, if she rose from being so low? Could she be, well, escaped from that hell? Enough to link in with social network? If she never had kids, if she ever had kids, did she go berserk? She was one of the wonders of Echo Park, and there are more. Thank you for
Oh.
listening.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Oh, that was priceless.
You're most welcome. Thank you for asking.
Next, we'd like to hear from Don Frank. Don, are you there? Can you unmute? Don, I need you to unmute. Don, can you unmute? In the corner, lower right, lower left-hand corner. Click on the microphone that has the little red slash to it.
There is a slight chance, Mark, that it's not functioning for him, that he's actually clicking it and it's not doing anything. I'm also inviting him to unmute. And if it doesn't work, maybe we'll come back to him if there's somebody who can go next. Up to you.
Click on the arrow next to the microphone. The arrow next to the microphone, click on it and click microphone real tech.
Oh.
Mark,
See?
maybe we should move to the
Okay.
next and then give Donald a little bit of time to figure it out.
Okay, that'll work. Harvey, are you there? Can you unmute?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, hi. Let's, if you would, please share your story with us. We'd really
Yeah,
appreciate
sure.
it.
I'll be happy to. Thanks for asking me. My story of the Pacific Electric red car actually begins in Chicago, where I was born, and was a rail fan at a very young age, and of course was raised on the interurban electric railways of the Chicago area, the North Shore, South Shore, and Roaring and Elgin. And when my folks announced that we were going to be moving to California when I was 14 years old, I said, what are the interurbans out there? And I had heard of this Pacific Electric system, but didn't know much about it. And I remember going to a hobby store in the Chicago area where I lived, and there was a Railroad Magazine article, Railroad Magazine with a picture of a red car on the cover. And I bought the book, and the article was entitled Pacific Electric Railway, the world's greatest interurban that never grew up with the world that it had made. And that was really significant because the PE did make Southern California. It was a phenomenal system, and it covered, as Alan said, a large segment of the geographics of all of Southern California, and it influenced the development, the real estate development, and all aspects of life in Southern California as it was growing. So when we moved out here, my folks, we had a family in the Valley, and so we were going through Cahuenga Pass to visit them, and the San Fernando Valley line had just been abandoned not too long before that. And here was this infrastructure in the middle of the Hollywood freeway of an electric railroad with station stops in the middle. And I said, what is this? Do the red cars? Well, that was the red cars. They got rid of those. I said, they got rid of them. In my 14-year-old mind, I said, why'd they get rid of the red cars? And they said, well, they just were. And as I became a citizen of Southern California and a student of the Pacific Electric, I realized that was not Pacific Electric's first abandonment by a long shot. And they had been getting rid of red car lines all along. But it just seemed so perfect to me to be in the middle of the freeway, and it just looked great to me. So as I said, I became a student of the Pacific Electric Railroad, and I did that by meeting rail fan friends like Alan. The first rail fan I met, it was actually a fellow named the late Jeff Moreau. And Jeff was a historian, a Huntington's historian, and really dissected the history of the PE. And I met him, very interesting way. My folks bought a duplex in the area of Wilshire and Robertson, but that's Beverly Hills, but it was like 2 blocks south. So they were proud to say that we're going to live Beverly Hills adjacent. And that sounds very fancy, but to me, it was West Hollywood Car House adjacent. Now that's impressive, you see. So I was able to ride my bicycle after dinner, not into I went through Beverly Hills, but I went up into West Hollywood, and I would go to Melrose, and the streetcars, the red cars turning in for the night would come in off Santa Monica Boulevard. They come through the whole West Hollywood Car House area, which is a huge piece of real estate, come down to Melrose. And just before they crossed Melrose, there was what was called in the railroad business a tail track. And then they could reverse direction and go into the back end of the car house, and the car would get cleaned and serviced for the next day's service. And I would talk to the motormen as they were changing ends to go back into the car house. And this one motorman, we became friends. His name was Bob Lowing. And he was not only a motorman, but he was a rail fan, and a good one, because he took photographs. He was a great photographer, and photography is a very important part of rail fanning, as Alan can attest to with his beautiful lifelong work he's been doing.
Thank you.
Anyways, Bob said, why don't you come ride with me down to on my last run? So I would get done with dinner, and I would go up to Santa Monica Boulevard and put my bike in the weeds and hide in the bushes, and get on Bob's car, and we go out to Beverly Hills, and then ride all the way downtown to Subway Terminal, come back out, and then turn in at the West Hollywood Car House. I would do that a couple of times a week. I was riding downtown through Hollywood, past the Chinese Theater and all the great places that people read about and hear about and all that. And it was something that became a part of my life. And it was at that time, he says, I have a young rail fan I want you to meet. And that was Jeff. And he's gone, but he left a remarkable collection of photography and other railroadiana of the PE to the Southern California Railroad Museum. And I work in the archives there. I'm an archivist at the museum, and I get to work on Jeff's work and other rail fan contributions that have been made to the museum. So anyways, I experienced the red cars in their last days of operation. I mean, it was October of '53 when it was transitioning from the Pacific Electric to the Metropolitan Coach Lines, as Alan mentioned, and then to Los Angeles Metropolitan Transit Authority. And what was really happening there, and if you think of the names and the corporate entities that are the Pacific Electric on one hand and Metropolitan Transit Authority on the other hand, and so on, what was happening was the same thing that happened across the country. It was not unique to Southern California. And transit companies, public transit companies were transitioning from private held corporations, stock companies, and however it was, to public entities as they are today. And I am hard pressed to think of any privately owned bus companies in the country today, or rail operations. I think there are none. I don't want to be that absolute, but I think I'm right. So it was a transition period, and I was very fortunate to be able to experience the last days of the red cars in Southern California. You're muted. I can't hear you. Mark, you're muted.
Oh,
There you go.
there we go. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Stories like that give me chills. Really.
Okay.
I'm a student of history, and I really believe that, if you don't have a good sense of your history, then you're destined to repeat it. And it's just important to keep these stories out there and to preserve them wherever possible. And your contribution is extremely valuable. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Don, did we ever get straight with Don? Don Frank?
No, unfortunately, I haven't heard anything from Leslie or Don, but Don, if you go to the lower left corner of your screen, you'll see the little microphone. Leslie said he should be okay now. So great.
Okay, okay. There
How
we go.
about now?
There we go. All right, Don, how you doing?
I'm fine.
Don't feel so all alone. I'm challenged by the technology too.
Okay, wait a minute. Meeting alert. The host is not. I'm trying to clear this off here a little bit. Okay. All right.
Okay.
My name is Donald Frank. I was born in Los Angeles, West LA in 1934. I now live in Palm Desert, so I've been in Southern California all my life. I remember as a child that the red car, we used to call it, just the streetcar, we used to call it. We never used the word red car until the yellow car started over on Pico. We used to use it to walk over about a block and a half, my mother and myself, and we used to get on and go down to the beach. And that's the part I remember, is driving in, riding in that a big railroad car. It was really a wonderful thing. I really enjoyed it. It was like going on a ride at an amusement center. And so it was very important to us because we used this for our main transportation, because we only had one car that my father was using to go to work. He owned a store down on Venice Boulevard near downtown. He was a pharmacist. He owned a general drugstore there for over 30 years at Venice and Bonnie Bray. After the war, we moved down there on Bonnie Bray. So it's about a block from Venice Boulevard, which the train kept, runs back and forth all day long. And we used to take that train to go all the way to the beach and back, or to West LA where we had friends. And then when I grew up there as a teenager mainly, I used to help my friend sell newspapers at the corner of Union and Venice Boulevard. In the afternoon, it was the Herald newspaper. And people would come by and we'd stand in the safety zone where where passengers would wait to get on and off the streetcar. And when the signal was stopped and the train stopped, people would, reach their hand out the window and hand us money for the latest edition of the Herald newspaper. And basically, it was the same people every day. And sometimes that train would start before I could get the change out, and people would say, well, I'll catch you tomorrow. And boy, you better give them the change tomorrow, or they remembered it. So anyway, that was just one of the things. When I turned around 16 and I was driving, we didn't use the streetcar at all, maybe just to go downtown. It was pretty important. I mean, it was just part of life. And living on Bonnie Bray and listening to the train go by at night with the clanging bell and so on, it was very peaceful. Really enjoyed it. It was just part of life to see that streetcar go by. Learning to drive, you had to be very cautious in crossing the tracks on the two-lane driving, sometimes, especially when it rained, because the tires on those automobiles around wartime and that were very narrow, and they would get caught in those tracks and spin, and you would slip. Sometimes you would slide, sometimes it would be very dangerous. You might run into something, so you had to cross that track a certain way, and you were taught that way by a person that was teaching you how to drive. So it was part of it. And we eventually, when the red car or when streetcar disappeared, it was kind of, something missing. But I had a car, so I drove back and forth, and it didn't, we did not, miss the train at all, except if you wanted to go downtown. And that's my experiences, there. I really enjoyed that train. It was just part of growing up. It was like being, that was there and you used it. Just part of it. So, and I thank you very much for this presentation. I've enjoyed it so far very much. Thank you. I lost him. Did I lose you?
Okay. Sometimes I have a little trouble getting unmuted, but thank you very much, Don. We really appreciate that. You know, I was talking to my mother a little earlier. She grew up on the east side, and I asked her about her experiences on the red car, and she said that when she was growing up, there was everything that they needed was right there on the east side. It's like, you know, the markets, the drugstore, everything was right there. So they didn't used to have to travel that much. She was within walking distance of school and the YMCA and everything else. But she said the one thing that she did take the red car for was to go to the beach. It was just a regular thing with her. It's like, we're going to the beach, red car, boom, gone. Anyway, thank you very much, Don. Really appreciate that. Alan, we'd like to call you back because I know you probably got some stories to tell that you haven't told us yet. And I'm really interested to hear those. Alan Weeks. Ah, there you are.
So I'm muted. Okay. There were two different things there and I couldn't figure out which one. No, I just want to say that when I did grow up in Los Angeles, I grew up in the south part of the town near 54th and Western. And I was surrounded by yellow car system. And as a kid, I would go down to the corner and a block away and watch the cars pull in at night. All the different lines pulled into a large car barn at 2nd Avenue and 54th Street. I'd go down there and the corner and just watch one car after another coming in. Then my mother took me on the streetcar one day and we went downtown and I was very young and I was excited by seeing all of the tracks and different lines and just really very exciting. Now this was the yellow car system. Then I used it to go to junior high school at Audubon Junior High School on Crenshaw and Leimert, which is near the new Crenshaw line that's coming in, being built right now, finished up. And so anyway, I used that yellow car, two of them. I rode the 8 car up to Crenshaw and got off there and went over and caught the 5 car and went to junior high school. And there I met a friend of mine that he was interested in streetcars too. And I thought I was the only one, but we realized we thought we were both the only ones. And then one day he came and he said, you know what, there's a subway here. And I said, what, subway? I didn't know this subway. And so he said, yeah, my grandfather took me on the subway. We went to Glendale. And I said, really? And red cars? And yeah, so I decided to experiment around, look around, and there were red car lines all over. So I began riding as many red cars as I could. My parents trusted me, and I rode both systems, the yellow cars and the red cars. I rode them all. And so that was my introduction into the Pacific Electric Railway. And then I started taking pictures about 15, and I thought, well, I'd like to take pictures so I have something to remember. I didn't realize it would be taken until I'm 89 years old, but I'm still taking pictures. I have also great memories of riding to the beach with the other guys in the neighborhood. We would go down and get on the Venice Short Line, took the Western Avenue bus and rode up to 16th Street or Venice. And then we went from there all the way out to Ocean Park, Santa Monica, and Venice and Santa Monica. And it was quite a trip. We'd take our towels, spend the day, and then come back. And I think it was only 25 cents one way. So, and that was fun. Like Don said, I believe it was Don said that he liked those big interurban cars, and they were big, and they had open platforms where you could go out and stand on the platform while the car was rolling, and you could look down and see the couplers and see the street and everything. And it was kind of fun, kind of special. We could spend, I won't go into it, we could spend a long time on the Great Transit Conspiracy. There's so many myths about that. And it had nothing to do with the PE. It did have something to do with the lawsuit in the federal government against the Los Angeles Transit Lines, the yellow car system, but not the PE. And one of my fondest memories is riding the Santa Ana line at night, sometimes during the war when there was a lot of heavy military traffic on that line. But it was a pretty fast line. It would go from LA to Santa Ana pretty fast. And it was a single track line because they tore up the rail just before the second rail, just before World War II, and sold the steel to Japan, which probably made bombs out of it to bomb Pearl Harbor, which was very ironic. But I would go down there and get off the red car in Garden Grove. My grandfather had an orange grove there, and it was right at the corner of 17th and Beach Boulevard. I believe there was nothing there but a gas station and a few things. I think that's the center of Garden Grove, but I don't know. I haven't been back. But I'd get off and they would let me off in the orange grove because the tracks ran right next to my grandfather's orange grove, and we would irrigate the property and then go home at night. My grandmother had dinner for us, and I'd stay all night. And the next day, my parents would come and pick me up and take me back home. But the PE was really something special. I guess we took it for granted until it was too late. But anyway, I guess that's probably enough. Take up our time. So thank you.
Thank you. I want to have an off-camera talk with you one day about the conspiracy.
Oh, I'd be happy to.
Because it keeps coming up.
I can send you some documents too.
I'd love it. I'd love it.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much, Al. Really appreciate that.
I appreciate being asked, and I enjoyed the program. We all learned a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd like
And
to
I love your murals. They're great.
I'd like to be a part of that discussion about the conspiracy, by the way. It's Harvey Lehner speaking.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You might have a different view.
I haven't heard the same view twice. Let's say that.
Hey, Mark, it looks like Jerry Delgado has joined us, just
Oh,
joined.
great. Okay, where are you, Jerry? Oh, there we go. Full disclosure, this is my mother. Where's, oh, she's got help. She's got tech help too.
Yeah, the tech help is here.
All right.
It's my neighbor, Dirk.
Howdy.
Dirk, how you doing?
But you'll have to show me later on what you did so that I can.
I think I only had to do that once. I think next time it'll work for you.
What, the launch?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I think you'll be fine next time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dirk. Really appreciate it.
You're
Hi,
welcome.
Mom.
Have fun.
Congratulations, Mark.
Hey, thank you.
That's Lynn. Take care.
All right, you too.
See you. Well, I'm sorry.
That's okay, Mom, as long as you're here. So tell us about your experiences on the red car when you were growing up.
Oh, you really want to hear that?
I want to
Okay.
hear that.
Okay.
Because you
first
never
of
told
all-
me.
I wonder why. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody responsible for having this this program this afternoon, because it has brought back many memories and some mostly good memories. And I feel like I've been strolling down memory lane, which is a wonderful thing at this age. Probably everybody has spoken, and I have not heard what they've said, but it's okay. I lived on the east side, of course, about a block from the YMCA. I don't know if anybody remembers the YMCA. That was on 28th Street. So I lived at 28th and Griffith Avenue. And I used to walk, oh, I don't know how far it was now, to the red car during the summer and of course on the weekends. And there were a group of us. My next door neighbor, Leo Silverman, used to walk with me, and the other neighbor, Betty Wong, would walk with me, and we'd pick up people along the way and all walk together and board the red car. all heading for Santa Monica, one of our favorite places to be. And we would just have such a good time on the red car. And of course, along the way, many of our friends would join us and we would all giggle and laugh and act like regular 12 and 13-year-old kids. And we would get to Venice and then walk over to the pier, Santa Monica, and go on the roller coaster several times. Not too many times for me, because my stomach wouldn't stand that. But it was a lot of fun, and we had our allowances, which of course amounted to probably about $5 or so, enough to get us to Santa Monica and to have a ride or two on the roller coaster, and of course enjoy the wonderful hamburgers. Now I like In-N-Out and I like the Habit, but there was nothing like the hamburgers at the beach. And maybe they had a little sand in them, I don't know, but they were absolutely delicious. And we would have that with French fries, and the French fries had malted vinegar on them, just a little bit, but just enough to just really make them yummy. And so we would have that, and we would go over to the Santa Monica, and there was a nice, if I remember correctly, a nice grassy area after the sand. There's the ocean, the sand, and then a grassy area, and then a little hill, and the hill had some sculptures on it, and they were big enough that we could climb on them. So there were like horses made of, I don't know what, but it looked like clay, about the color of clay, pinkish color. Some of you may know exactly what I'm talking about, and then others may not. But anyway, it was a lot of fun to climb all over those and just have a wonderful time. It was a good feeling at that time because we didn't have anything to stress us out like computers and iPads, iPhones, and all that good stuff. We just would communicate on the telephone and see each other all during the summer, of course. Just had a wonderful time. And then we would head back home, much before dark, because we knew we had to be in the house before it got dark, or else. And I'm sure everybody can imagine what or else meant. We knew at that time. And anyway, we would head for home and arrive, and it was a wonderful day. And I am just so pleased that I had that opportunity at that age and at that time, particular time, to enjoy all of that. And once again, I'd like to thank all of you, all of you who put this together so that we could have a little stroll down memory lane, thinking about the red car. Thank you. Should I push leave?
No, don't push leave. I
Okay,
think Mark is going to unmute himself.
okay.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Okay. Finally, and thanks again, Ma. Really
Okay.
appreciate
Did
it.
I catch you in the middle of something, cut you off?
No, no, no. I was just trying to unmute, and it's like, somebody controls your ability to unmute with, so it's like I didn't have it right then.
Okay.
But glad you got on.
Oh, I am too. And if it hadn't been for Dirk, and I just thought of him a few minutes ago, and he lives across the street. I called him and he said, I'll be right over.
Oh, that's
It's
great.
very, very kind of him. And he had this all figured out and done in 5 minutes.
Yeah, I knew it couldn't be anything too serious.
Well, he's going to have to show me.
Well, thank you very much, Mom. At this time, I think we can open it up to some questions. Yeah, Leticia?
Yes. So sorry, Letitia, I'll just let folks know. So yeah, we're gonna start the Q&A portion. If folks, we're gonna take some questions from the chat as well. If people have questions to ask just kind of live, I ask you to please look at the menu on your screen towards the right. There's something you see called reactions. And over there's an option for you to raise your hand if you have a question. So, so we will start off with some questions from the chat, but then we will also alternate with just questions that folks have right now. And yeah, so I think firstly, we just want to let folks know there was a question about whether this event will be recorded and accessible after the event. So Letitia, you can let folks know.
It will. Our plan is to post it to our Metro YouTube page, and we will send an email via Eventbrite where you probably RSVP'd to the Zoom, and then you can get a direct link and a reminder that we have posted it, and that'll probably be in the next week or so.
Great, thank you, Letitia. I'd say let's actually start with this. There's a nice question that just came through from Mark, whether you have worked in glass or mosaic before, and this came from Camilla Tate.
Actually, to be quite honest with you, I'm not a big fan of public art, surprisingly. Part of the reason is I've sat on a lot of panels to determine artists that get commissions for a lot of these public art pieces. And in so many instances, I find that their ideas have been compromised by the architects. So, you know, I've kind of shied away from it, but Metro's got their program together in such a way where really I felt that there was nothing that impinged on my ability to actually realize the work that I wanted to do. And so I felt very comfortable with that. And the staff at Metro has been incredibly supportive of all of my efforts and at every step. And I'm really appreciative of that. That's it.
Mark, is this your first glass mosaic piece?
Yes, this is it. First and probably last. Not that it was difficult, mind you, but I just, you know, I work considerably smaller than that. As a matter of fact, right now, the pieces that I'm working on are in the 16 to 20 inch range. So, you know, working large is, it's work. It's a lot of work.
Sasha, I don't see any hands offhand. Would you like to take another chat question?
Yes, actually, I think that this is actually a question from James Bartlett, and this might be actually like a question to the community, but is it possible to buy toy or scale versions of red cars or of the green and yellow buses? If anybody knows that offhand. Possibly not.
Harvey? Looks like Harvey might.
Okay.
Feel free to unmute.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good, okay. I'm not a modeler. We rail fans have all different areas of specialty in the hobby. Modeling is not one of mine. However, I do know that there are red car models available at some of the hobby shops. Trying to think of the names of them because I don't frequent them that often. But the simple answer is yes, there are models available, and I would just suggest that you search them or go to. There's Allied models on Sepulveda. I think they're still there. That would be a very good start. Okay.
Thank you so much. Do we actually, so we had a question from BRS, which is, and this is more so a question for Metro, maybe Letitia, you have an answer for this. This is how much of the red car right of way is being used by present light rail, and how many are roads and freeways?
That's a great question. I do not feel equipped to answer it, but I do know that as we are planning and building new rail lines, as well as active transportation projects, meaning where we're creating bike and pedestrian pathways, we are utilizing previous rail right of way, but I can't give you a number, square footage, linear feet, but could follow up, could dig a little deeper. if anybody has a, either Alan or anyone else has a sense, I welcome you to put it in the chat.
Can I just give a quick answer on that?
Sure.
Okay, certainly, as Alan pointed out, the Long Beach line, the light rail line down to Long Beach, the A line, follows very much the whole Pacific Electric red car line right away. Same right away. The line out, the Expo line, I'm going to use the old names. I know they're now letter lines, and I'm not quite up to date on that. But at any rate, the Expo line from SC all the way out to just short of the terminal in Santa Monica is on a rail line, old Pacific Electric rail line known as the Santa Monica Airline. And airline is a rail industry term. If it's a straight rail line, it doesn't have a lot of curves in it and that type of thing, it's referred to as an airline because it flies like the crow, okay? And the Santa Monica Airline is a very historic line. It was built originally by the Los Angeles and Independence Railroad in the 1800s as a steam road. And the Independence in the name, Los Angeles and Independence, is in the Owens Valley, the town of Independence. It was going to actually run all the way up to the Owens Valley to bring mine ore out to the port of Santa Monica. And that was the purpose of that railroad. It never made it because the Southern Pacific wouldn't let their tracks cross this SP tracks at Alameda. So that was like the end of the ambitious Los Angeles and Independence Railroad. But then it became acquired by the Southern Pacific, and it became known as the Pacific Electric Santa Monica Airline. And that's where the Expo line runs today. Those are the two that come to mind right now as far as former red car lines. But the Expo line that's being extended out to towards Pomona, out east beyond Azusa and Glendora, help me anybody. That's not on red car right away, but it's on the old Santa Fe 2nd District main line where the Super Chief used to run. So anyways, there you go.
Thank you, Harvey. That's perfect. We have a question with a raised hand. Richard Hedges, please go ahead and unmute yourself if you haven't already.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the red line. There's actually maps available, the old red line system online. And if you set them side by side, I think the gold line, which runs at the end of the red line, I think that's on part of the old right of way too. But folks who live in LA, I don't live in LA, I'm just fascinated with the system and covet it because of all the money you have to improve what you have now. I've laid those maps side by side, and I think part of that line that's actually not light rail, but looks very much like light rail and runs on its own right of way for much of the way is on some of the old red car right of way. Thank you.
Can I just add one thing? The line he's talking about, the goal line, that's all on the former Burlington Northern Santa Fe, was that Topeka and the Santa Fe. So the goal line bought that whole right of MTA bought that whole right of way. So the whole line going to Pomona is going to be on that rail line. That was not the red car.
We have a question from Brian Smith asking whether Huntington Boulevard was also a former red car line right of way.
Yes. 4 tracks.
Gee.
Very impressive.
We have a question from Michael Berg in the audience. Michael, go ahead.
Hi, I have a question for Alan. Can he show a picture right now and talk about something?
Could you share what more you're interested in? Because he may or may not have that photo available.
No, I know that he does because Alan and I are friends. And
oh, okay.
I would like Alan to show everybody a photograph of the main station and then the track coming out of the main station above ground. Just for a second, please.
I don't have any pictures handy. I wouldn't know how to put it up. I'm sorry. I haven't learned, you haven't taught me that yet.
Okay.
He's very
I
good
held
at putting up maps and pictures, and I can't do that. You have to teach me. You talk, which picture are you talking about? I'm not sure you're.
Well, there was a train track configuration that you call it. It was a very unique name.
Oh, the
And it was
puzzle
where the
switch?
tracks. Yes.
The puzzle switch?
The tracks went and switched many different directions between two tracks. So it was called the puzzle switch.
Well, that's one terminology. There's others. I forgot. You know, Susan mentioned the other name. She's a track engineer.
Yeah, there is two names for it. I'm sorry, everybody. We're talking about something you can't see. My
Yeah.
apologies.
Sorry.
It's okay. We're getting a window into the nuances that you all, get into. So it's great, actually. Sasha, is there another question from the chat you want to pose? Thanks, Michael.
Yes, there were, so this is actually, Bess asked a question about whether one could have taken the red car to the Hollywood Bowl. Does anybody have any insight into that?
Harvey.
Yes, Harvey. Yes, the Hollywood Bowl was one of the stops on the way on the San Fernando Valley line. So until the end of 1952, you could take a red car to the Hollywood Bowl.
That's very cool.
And you could take it home too.
And you can take it today, just a note, you can take it today. However, you need to take a bus, just a short bus. So it's not, there's a link that needs to be made, but you can get close.
If I remember correctly, there was quite a debate at the MTA over putting in a Hollywood Bowl station on the red line, but they didn't,
I have a question for either Harvey or Alan. I live in Altadena, and I was wondering, did the red car go all the way up to the Mount Low station?
Yes, not
It did.
not the red car itself, but one line took you into Rubio Canyon. And then from there, the incline railway went up to Echo Mountain. And then there was another narrow gauge railroad that took you all the way around to the tavern near Mount Low.
Right. And the tavern burned down, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
We had another question here. Can anyone speak of using the stairways in Echo Park and Silver Lake to access the red car or other lines?
What exactly was the question again? I didn't quite get it.
There are like staircases in Echo Park and Silver Lake that they're kind of hidden staircases, as they've been called, but we have someone asking if those staircases were used at all to access the red car and any.
Well, I know of one particular place on the Glendale line. It would cross Fletcher Drive right near Riverside Drive. And there was a huge trestle across there. When they tore that trestle down, they left the stairways. There were concrete stairways that went up from Fletcher Drive where you could walk up to the station and get on at the end of the bridge. That's the only one I know of.
That's a really great question, though, thinking about those staircases, their origin, and the fact that they may be, some of them, remnants of a former rail line.
True.
I can speak to that a little bit, Letitia.
Go ahead, Holly.
In Echo Park, I'm a member of the Echo Park Historical Society, and we do have a number of stories that have been documented that these staircases in Echo Park were actually built as a way for people to get down from the hillside and actually access the red car that ran up Echo Park Avenue, and then I believe down Glendale. Well, maybe it met up with the one on Glendale Boulevard or at Sunset Boulevard. I don't know the routes that well, but the staircases were used as part of the public transportation system. And they usually were built on streets. There's one next to my house that they're built on streets which are too steep to grade as a street. So they built them as staircase streets.
Yeah. There is a staircase also off of Scott Avenue, which is now kind of a thoroughfare to get to Dodger Stadium. And the stairs come down from a cul-de-sac off Scott. I wish I could remember the name of it. I think it's El Lindo or something, but you can walk down to Sunset Boulevard. And that was one way that my friend Rhonda and I would go to get to the red car to go out to Santa Monica.
I think that may be the La Vida Terrace.
That's it. La Vida Terrace. You
Yes.
got it, Holly. Thanks. Historians matter.
We have another question from Roger Hill, unless Roger, was that your previous hand?
Yes, it's not a question actually, but I think it was Mark who was asking about Altadena. If you go on Lake Avenue, somewhere around Calaveras or so on the west side of Lake, you can see the substation, which is still there, is being used by a thrift shop now. I think
Right, it's a thrift shop now.
It's a magnificent building. It's near the Pizza Hut on the west side of North Lake.
Right.
And you can't miss it. It's a really, they don't make substations like that anymore.
Yeah, I think there's a little legend on the outside of it too, explaining what it was used for back in the day.
Yeah, powered the Mount Low line.
I had the privilege of working there one summer when I was in college. Through the college, I got a part-time summer job, and it was in that building. And of course, I knew right away what it was, but I mentioned to other people that it was a powerhouse, and nobody believed me. But we were making puppets out of latex rubber in a factory there, and just thought I'd throw that in there.
So we have a number of questions in the chat. And I do want to just do a time check. It is about 12:30 and want to honor everybody's lunch or the remainder of their Saturday. What we're going to do is read just a few more, I think, and then start to wrap up.
We did have a question about whether the Lancashire Depot is part of the old red car system. Anybody have info about that?
Harvey?
Yeah, the depot that's at Lancashire, the north end of the Red Line and the Orange Line terminal, if that's what you're referring to, that's the old Pacific Electric North Hollywood station, and it's been preserved, and now it's a coffee shop and whatever else may be in there as tenants. But that structure was the North Hollywood depot of the Pacific Electric. Actually, the Southern Pacific also shared, you could buy Southern Pacific or Pacific Electric tickets there, but yes, that's what that was.
Thanks, Harvey. Sasha, do we have one more question?
Yes. Actually, Miriam, there was a question from James Bartlett that you're looking at specifically. Because I think I asked the one about the toy scale versions, but
There's one about an old red trolley parked at the Red Chamber Company in Vernon.
oh, okay. I believe someone answered that in the chat. Let me see. He was asking, can you read that, please, Miriam?
sorry, I scrolled away from it, but I wonder if an old red trolley is parked at the Red Chamber Company in Vernon. They have an old trolley or train car in their car park, it looks like. If anybody kind of knows about that. Or just anybody else's stories about the staircases or any thoughts before we wrap.
Did somebody say something about Vernon? I'll tell you a story. There was a rail fan named Richard Fellows, Fellows. And he evidently had plenty of money, and he bought some of these old cars and rehabbed them. And he stored them in a former Southern California Edison building in Vernon. Now, it was kind of funny because I wrote to him one time back in the 80s. And in 87, he invited me and a friend to look at them. And it was a former powerhouse for Southern California Edison. You can still see the Southern California Edison logo on it, but it had no other logo. He did not want it publicized, so he didn't put any signs or logos on it. But he let me in and showed me some of the old cars that he had collected. He used them in parades. One of them was a Pacific Electric car, I believe 1159 or something like that, and used them in parades. And he had some of the old LA Railway cars and others. I didn't take pictures of, no, I know what I did. I took pictures and then I lost them because we didn't have any, I didn't put any film in the camera. I forgot to do that. Okay, anyway, so I saw them. And about a year later, he was killed in a surfing accident. His name was Richard Fellows, Fellows. So his collection was sold. It was auctioned off. I think the Southern California Railway Museum down in Paris, California, has some of his equipment. I'm not sure where some of his other equipment went. But he evidently had a lot of money and he made good use of it. So we're indebted to him for preserving all these cars. If I had that kind of money, I probably would not preserve old cars. So they're still there. They are, alive and well at the Paris Museum. It used to be called the Orange Empire Railway Museum, but it's in Paris, California, near Riverside.
Yorkman, can I add one thing to that story? Richard Fellows, that car that he put rubber tires on, that was later used by the city of Los Angeles on that San Pedro red car that ran for a few years.
Okay.
It's a 1058. It may be out of Paris now. I don't know where it is now.
Yeah.
But it ran for a few years. They took the rubber tires off and put rail back on and actually ran it.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's stored. It's stored with the two replica 500s they had at the waterfront down in San Pedro. It's in some warehouse someplace, but it has been returned as a rail vehicle, and it would be wonderful to get that out at the museum, definitely. The car number 1058 is representative of the fact that the 1000 series red cars ended at 1057. So when he took this car and built it as a street vehicle, he gave it the next number of the series, 1058.
Good.
The end.
Well, on behalf of Metro Arts and Design, I'd like to thank everybody for sharing more than maybe even expected to share. So many questions that our group of community members were able to answer. And I want to make sure that you all feel invited on the opening day, come 2022 is what we're projecting. For the opening of Mark's artwork, the station where his artwork will be, and just another way to celebrate and honor the former red car. So Mark, any final words?
Yeah, I really just want to extend my deepest appreciation to all of you. One of the things that has bothered me for a long time is that, things in this city are kind of taken for granted and buildings get torn down and You know, I was passing by a neighborhood the other day and it's like, well, I knew what used to be there, but it's not there anymore. And when did this thing get built? And, you know, I feel the same way about things like the red car. You know, if the memory isn't kept alive some sort of way, then oftentimes people will never know it existed. And so your testimonies are just that much more valuable because, you know, it's the firsthand encounters with these things that I think will endure and which will really inform future generations in terms of what existed in this city. So thank you again. You've done an incredible service to your community, and I really do appreciate it. And with that, I think we will wrap this up. Thank you again very much. And thank you, Leticia and Sasha and everybody at Metro and everybody at Cal State Online.
Yes, thank you all. Thank you, Miriam. Thank you, Sasha and Mark. And Holly for chiming in also with Metro Art.
Adios.
Bye, everybody.